Tycho's final hour. The beating of powerful wings, a feeling of infinite melancholy. That it had come to this. Comrades in arms trapped in a battle to the death. Then he saw him, once his brother, now his enemy. A flash of blades and an explosion of blood, a howling pain bursting through his body like an electric shock, and he opened his eyes, sweat covering his skin with an oily sheen, his mouth filled with blood. He swallowed and ran his tongue over his teeth, fighting against the visions. But no matter how hard he tried to push them away, they were always there, lurking in the back of his mind. Brother Captain Erasmus Tycho stood and turned to leave the chapel, stopping when he saw Chaplain Lamartine in the archway, his face hidden by the flickering shadows cast by the electro-torches.
"You were seeing them again?"
Lamartine asked. Tycho nodded slowly. "Yes," he whispered. "I see them even now. I can feel their pain. It burns me." Lamartine stepped closer and placed his hands on his friend's shoulders. He had always known this moment would come, but that did not ease the pain. It was fitting that it happened on Armageddon. He could see the glazed look in Tycho's eyes and knew that part of his mind was no longer in the present, but had been torn back to the time of the great betrayal, to the last battle of the Primarch Sanguinius, to his death. "Have they considered my request?" Tycho asked.
"They have, my friend,"
Lamartine replied sorrowfully. "And?"
"Your wish will be granted, Erasmus. The honor of leading the desperate assault on the Tempestora breach in the morning is yours. Come, I will perform the Moripatris."
Dressed in his freshly painted black armor, Tycho stared towards the besieged Hive Tempestora as the chaplain moved among the men of the suicide assault, the first warriors to charge the breach, the first to die. He felt his pulse quicken, his breathing grow shallow. The Imperial Palace was in ruins. Thousands lay dead. He blinked and saw bloated gargants, demon-faced titans lurking among the ruins of Terra like predatory gods, killing and destroying all in their path, positioning themselves to fire upon the Hive. Somewhere in the crater-filled hell before him was the enemy who had horribly scarred him so many years ago. The betrayal of one man had led them to this, the pride and arrogance of one man. But they had a chance to end it here. His emperor had decided to take the fight to Horus, and Sanguinius of the Blood Angels would not fail him. Chaplain Lamartine stopped in front of Tycho, dipped his finger into a chalice filled with blood, and anointed Tycho's helm with it in an irregular cross.
"With my blood, I commend your soul to the Emperor. May he watch over you this day."
"And you as well, Dorn," Tycho said, grasping Lamartine's hand in the warrior's salute, wrist to wrist. "One last time, brother."
"Yes."
Lamartine nodded, knowing he had truly lost Tycho now.
"One last time."
Tycho hurled another greenskin from the rubble with a backhanded sweep of his fist. Bones shattered, blood sprayed. The top of the breach was less than 10 meters away. Enemy fire carved a path toward him, kicking up plumes of dust and rock all around. He felt the powerful impacts but ignored them, charging up the debris-littered slope. Choking dust and smoke filled the air. All he could see before him were shadowy forms. Brother Space Marines, whose oaths of loyalty were now ashes in the dust. He hated them as he had never hated anything before. A sword swung toward his head, striking his shoulder plate and tearing upward. Tycho's golden mask was ripped from his frozen face in a shower of blood and flesh. He howled in fury, holding the top of the breach, surrounded by his enemies. The orcs swarmed around the Blood Angels, dying by the dozens as 50 years of hatred and vengeance burned through Tycho's veins. Behind him, the last space marine of the desperate assault fell beneath orc blades. The others had been scattered by teleportation. He was alone. Tycho fought with the strength of legends, slashing and cutting down every foe that came near. He seized a fallen sword and continued the slaughter, raising and lowering his blade, drenching its edge in orc blood. No weapon could pierce his armor. No bullet could bring him down. The bodies of the orcs, countless in number, piled around him, forming his altar of death. The smoke parted, and a massive, hulking orc, clad in wheezing mechanical armor, lumbered toward him over the rubble. Black smoke billowed from rusted exhaust pipes, and enormous claws snapped on each of his arms. Tycho growled as the unquenchable fury of the black rage finally consumed him completely. Horus, the greatest and most beloved of the Primarchs. Why? We could have achieved everything we ever dreamed of. Why? Horus said nothing, swinging his clawed fist. Sanguinius leapt, dodging the mighty talon, twisting behind the traitor. He kicked forward, feeling the fangs of his enemy shatter beneath the heels of his boots. He landed lightly and rolled quickly to his feet as Horus struck again. His back was against the wall, nowhere to go but forward. The two brothers met, blade to blade, and Sanguinius realized he could not defeat Horus. His sword shattered, and Horus drove his claw through his armor, burying it deep in his abdomen. A searing agony spread through his chest as Horus ripped his heart out. Sanguinius spat blood into his brother's face and hissed, "I will die here, but you will die with me, traitor." As he spoke, he struck with his fist, tearing his enemy's throat out in a spray of blood. He felt Horus's grip weaken and collapse to the ground, his life force spilling from his ruined body. Faintly, he could hear his brothers calling his name, but with each second their voices faded. He had not failed his emperor. He smiled and closed his eyes as life left him. Lamartz watched as the small group of space marines carried their captain's body back toward the Imperial lines. The breach had fallen, and the outer ring of fortifications and bunkers was now in Imperial hands. Tycho had held the breach long enough for the rest of the army to reach the walls and turn the tide. With a tenderness that belied their blood-stained appearance, the Blood Angels laid Brother Captain Erasmus Tycho at Chaplain Lamartz's feet. Kneeling beside the bloodied corpse, Lamartz placed a hand on his friend's forehead and gazed into his face. Perhaps it was merely the relaxation of death, but he thought he saw a softening in Tycho's features, as if the terrible disfigurement he had suffered had receded into his flesh. He hoped it had.
"Farewell, brother,"
he whispered.
"You will never be forgotten."